format for today is myself and Aoife are going to take you through an overview of the Support for European Cooperation project Strand. And then in between, we're going to hear from Mary Conlon about her projects, because really, I always say that that's the carrot in this scenario. So you can hear from a Creative Europe project and you can see what they're about and what they can actually achieve and what they can bring to an Irish organizations in terms of kind of networking and benefits and all of those great outcomes. So let's just kick off now. So Aoife, I think you're thankfully in control today, so we'll just kick off. So the first thing to say is the Creative Europe Desk Culture Office is part of a network of 3 desks here in Ireland. So there are 2 media offices, one in Dublin and the media office in Galway, which serves the Irish language and regions. So they cover all funding related to the audiovisual sector. And then there's ourselves, the Culture Office. So we cover every creative and culture sector outside of film and TV, essentially. And we're based in the Arts Council. So the next slide. So what do we do? So essentially we're an information advice kind of training point here in Ireland to assist Irish applicants who are interested in developing proposals and making applications to Creative Europe, which is the main EU funding program for culture. So we promote the program all across the country and now on Zoom. We collaborate frequently with kind of key national stakeholders and agencies. We utilize the broader Creative Europe Desk network. So there's versions of us in the 40 countries participating in the program. So that can be a real help in terms of exchange of best practice, but also facilitating partnership searches across Europe. And then we also increasingly develop cross-sectoral events with our media colleagues. So the first thing I always say to people, if you're starting to kind of think about European funding, it's really important to always remember or have at the forefront of your mind why the EU funds culture. Essentially, this funding is another tool for the European Union to realize its social and political aims. So, that's something to always kind of have, kind of in the forefront of your mind. Now, that said, obviously, the main reason why probably any kind of agency funds culture is recognition of the intrinsic value and the kind of contribution, the way that arts and culture make all our lives better or have the potential. But in the case of the EU, it's really kind of linking to broader EU policy documents, and I've shared them here. So these are the main policy documents that have informed essentially all the funding programs that are currently starting in 2021. So we can send all these links after, but that's just something, you don't necessarily have to read them all in depth, but it's just have that in your mind. Next slide. So how does the EU fund culture? So there are direct funding actions. So that would be the European Capital of Culture, which we're all familiar with here. There's a number of prizes. So there's a prize for music, contemporary architecture, literature, and cultural heritage. And the reason we're here today really is the centrally administered funding program, Creative Europe. You can go on there. So I think, am I handing over to you now, Aoife? I'm trying to, oh, you're just mute. Yeah.
Hi. So yeah, as we'll go into in a minute, the actual kind of context of this program, but to start with, we'll look at the amount of money that has been allocated to the new program, which is a lot more than was expected. We were kind of expecting an increase, but obviously in the context of COVID, it was more of an increase. So now we have 2.44 billion across the whole program. So that's across the media sub-program and the culture sub-program, and then the cross-sectoral, which is between the two sectors. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So yeah, so as I said, the context of the increase of the budget is because of the resilience and recovery approach. Obviously, the creative sector was really affected and hard hit, and this is to foster and boost this the sectors and organisations across Europe. And in the first 2 years, they're talking about a front loaded of that budget being allocated for the program. So that's good news for people who are looking to apply or kind of getting ready to apply in this call or the next call. So the other priorities in the culture is innovation and joint creation, and increasingly joint creation and innovation are coming across the other kind of the other programs other than cooperation projects in this new program. And so this is really interesting, but also in the cooperation projects, innovation and joint creation among European organizations is a real focus. Cooperation and exchange of practices. So obviously this is cooperation with the organizations and your national partners and exchange of practices, but then across borders. So with other peer organizations in a European context where you're working in similar or kind of aligned areas and you exchange those practices. Capacity building of artists, and obviously of organizations as well. And that's a key area to foster and to build up the capacity of artists across Europe, and key players and multipliers. So this is kind of looking at how a project which is working across borders, but is also based very much locally. So we see this in Ireland, where a lot of successful projects have become kind of commission hubs and funding hubs for organizations, for other organizations nationally, and obviously artists who are commissioned, artists who are affected in that knock-on effect. So it's a positive in general. Sorry, just going to move myself and Katie across the screen. So the cross-cutting priorities for this programme, and these are key areas that the EU Commission are really, really interested in organisations to touch on or to work alongside, kind of work into their projects. So the proposals must consider inclusion, gender equality and environment and the fight against climate change. Now, they don't have to work in all of those areas, but definitely one area you're encouraged to take into account and to present an outline of a strategy to address this issue in your project. So that's one to remember. We'll talk at the end about kind of how your organization is working and whether you are already aligning with these kind of issues in your work. So the funding strands for this program are the European cooperation projects. Obviously, we're focusing on that today. Funding for European networks of cultural and creative organizations. And we see increasingly that a lot of, with Ormston House, Mary might touch on this, that a lot of their early conversations started by becoming part of a network in Europe. So it is a key into the kind of that networking and that connection with other peer organizations. The European platforms for promotion of emerging artists. There are a number of very active platforms with partners in Ireland, which is great to see. And we'll do some joint event on both those calls in the next couple of weeks. The circulation of European literary works. We'll also be doing an event. We'll give you the dates at the end of the presentation on that. Opportunist mobility was a pilot from 2018, but is now an ongoing funding call. We already presented on 4 of those calls this year, but there is no deadline for the rest of this year. The next deadline will be in 2022, but it is a mainstay now of the Creative Europe programme, which is great. And Music Moves Europe is to be. We don't know when that call will be, so we can kind of share that once we know. So what is a cooperation project? It's a multi-annual cultural artistic project, and we always kind of say that because it's multi-annual, it is very much about an organization kind of putting effort into maybe developmental area of work, which is a long-term embedded piece of work that not necessarily a busy organization can always allocate the funds for this. So in that way, it's very useful for an organization if it's a piece of work that they really want to undertake. This allows you the time and the multi-annual funding to do that, which is great. It involves partnerships between organizations in different countries, and that varies on the size of the cooperation project you apply for. It achieves common objectives across borders, so working with peer organizations, working in similar areas, and achieving those objectives kind of together. It requires match funding, and we'll talk a little bit about that, about our co-funding situation in Ireland. Individuals are not eligible to apply directly, but as I was just saying, that artists are participating in cooperation projects via organizations, through open calls, through project commissions, and also through mobility awards within those projects going to other countries in Europe. So there's a lot of opportunity for artists to work in within those projects anyway. And then it supports diverse partnerships and funds a broad range of activities across the project. I don't know I'll just keep going until you jump in, Katie. So projects should, or could, I suppose, as well, address a systemic problem or obstacle that is negatively affecting your sector. And this could be obviously a cross-border situation where other organizations or the sector in other countries are having the same kind of situation. So that's where you align with each other. That could be something around capacity, something around maybe audience development that isn't necessarily kind of working or needs to be developed on, something like that, where you might align your objective together. Collaborate with communities in a broad range of contexts, foster the exchange of skills and competencies amongst partners, increase European exposure and consumption of non-national European works. And that's obviously really important for Irish organizations as well, to have that internationalization of your work and the artists. And at this point, we're going to invite Mary. So I'll hand it back over to Katie.
Well, thanks, Aoife. So Mary, Aoife, do you want to stop sharing and Mary can share her screen? So I think, you know, having Ormston House here is almost a pitch perfect kind of case study of how to start working across borders or working internationally. Aoife mentioned that, but it was kind of, you know, maybe beginning with kind of joining a European network and going from there. And now we're at the point where they have 2 European projects to talk about here today, which is great. So I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Mary. Thanks so much.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. And I just want to point out at the beginning that I'm delighted to see 2 of our partners from the Memory of Water project are here today. So Ivona Price, who was the lead partner on Memory of Water, and Liz Gardner from Fable Vision Studios in Scotland, who also instigated this whole process. So delighted to have them here today as well. So my name is Mary Conlon, and I am the artistic director of Ormston House, which is a cultural resource centre in Limerick City. And I've been asked to give a short presentation on our Creative Europe project, Memory of Water, as a case study. I will mention our second Creative Europe project as well. So I've been asked to give this short presentation with a particular focus on the partnership, the organisational structure of the project, and the equal distribution of roles and responsibilities. And if Ivona and Liz want to add in any comments as well along the way, I'd be delighted to see that. So in the feedback from Creative Europe, the quality of our partnership, along with the quality of the activities, were where we scored the highest. So today I won't be going into detail on the activities, but if you're interested to know more, you can visit our project website at memoryofwater.eu. And likewise, you can visit the Ormston House website at ormstonhouse.com if you're interested in learning more about our programme. And I think Leona is going to add in some links into the chat there for you. So back to this morning's focus, I'll introduce Ormston House very briefly. So I established Ormston House with a group of students from Limerick School of Art and Design in 2011, and we formalised our legal structure in 2017. Limerick City and County Council purchased our venue in 2020, and Limerick's elected representatives formally approved our 30-year lease in 2021. And we currently have 3 part-time staff. So the reason I'm sharing this particular information is to give a glimpse into a short history, a modest scale, and our human resources capacity. So Memory of Water was our first Creative Europe project. You can see our core research question there on the first slide. And we're at the beginning of our second Creative Europe project now, which is called Artist Run Network Europe, and that's been led by my colleague, Niamh Brown. So the lead partner, sorry, is Candyland in Scotland, but for the Irish partner, my colleague Niamh Brown is leading. So the last time I was invited to present at a Creative Europe Desk event, it was about the importance of international networks. And Ormston House is a member of 3 international networks. So Artists Initiatives Meetings, Trans-Europe Halls, and the River Cities Platform Foundation. And this international connectivity is a direct legacy of Limerick National City of Culture in 2014 and Limerick's bid for European Capital of Culture in 2016. So even in 2021, we're still benefiting from those specific years of activity, additional investment and training, which have been so beneficial both on an organizational level and on a personal level. And I would really have to acknowledge Limerick's former Culture and Arts Officer, Sheila Deegan, who was a key driver in this work, and our current Culture and Arts Officer, Dr. Pippa Little, who continues to support the value of this experience for artists and arts workers as part of Limerick's cultural strategy. So Ormston House joined the River Cities Platform Foundation in 2017. So why did we join this particular network? During the ECOC bid, Limerick Culture and Arts Office held extensive public consultations in the city and county, and the topic most discussed by citizens was the River Shannon. So Ormston House established a long-term project on the River Shannon with a strong focus on local knowledge and community expertise. And we wanted to find out what was happening in other river cities around Europe. So the reason I'm sharing this is to show the importance of joining the right networks for you and your initiative. And each of our international networks is an invaluable resource to us and plays a distinct role in our thinking and programming. And shortly after we joined the River Cities Platform Foundation, Liz Gardner, who is the cultural planner and the director of Fable Vision Studios in Govan in Scotland, reached out to the network with a set of questions and a proposal to meet to discuss a Creative Europe application. And she had been participating and running an artistic residency program and research exchange between Govan and Gdansk in Poland, which she felt had the scope for continuation, expansion, and scaling up. But she also had serious concerns about regeneration policy at home in Govan and wanted to know if other cities, river cities, were experiencing the same challenges. So 5 member organizations responded, and we met in Gdansk in Poland, hosted by the Baltic Sea Cultural Centre, where the partnership was formally established. My travel, I'd like to say here, was supported by a travel and training grant. So there are travel and training grants available for people who are developing Creative Europe applications. Obviously that is on pause at the moment, but hopefully it will resume next year. So as you can see, the partnership went beyond our next door neighbours by including partners from geographically diverse range of countries. So this gave the project a pan-European dimension, and this is quite important. At that time, these member organisations also belonged to over 30 other European networks combined, enabling outreach to over 300 cultural organisations across Europe. So I think that number has actually grown significantly since 2018 when we submitted our application. So the partners are all members of the River Cities Platform Foundation, which is already a strong bond. Most of the partners had already been working together in various combinations, and we had different levels of experience, but we were all concerned with similar questions around what will happen with the post-industrial waterfront areas in our cities. And while the partners all had track records in arts programming, we represented a diverse consortium of complementary expertise in the cultural heritage sector. So it's important to remember that in 2018, 2018 was the designated year for the European Year of Cultural Heritage. We had a strong focus on cultural heritage in our application. So when you see the 6 organizations here, we're made up of a regional public institution, 2 municipalities, so local government departments, and 3 NGOs, and also very distinct NGOs. So Fable Vision is a social enterprise, Ormston House is a grassroots art space, and Intercult is an office with vast experience in European cooperations. And Ivona Price, who is the president of the River Cities Platform Foundation, is also the CEO of Intercult, who was our lead partner on the project. So most of the partners had experience in European projects and had received support from different EU programs. So in summary, the partnership was convincingly defined by artistic activity, network connectivity, geographical spread, and a strong mutual interest. So as I said, we had a planning meeting in Gdansk in Poland. So this was a 2-day structured gathering hosted by the Baltic Sea Cultural Centre and chaired by Ivona Price from Intercult. And each member presented their organisation, their experience, their areas of expertise, as well as the context of their city. And at that time, there were also Scottish artists nominated by Fable Vision Studios in Gdansk, making interventions in and around the former shipyard area, who also presented their practice. And we began to articulate the terms of reference. So here are some of the recurring words and phrases that began to emerge through all these presentations. And at the end of the meeting, we had established our purpose for the partnership. So to engage local communities in 6 cities, to share information about the regeneration processes in each city, and to find new ways forward together. So we had also identified the Creative Europe priorities relevant to our cooperation. We confirmed we would co-design an international residency program based around 3 key themes, and we agreed 3 target audiences. So this is a useful example here is our audience development plan was considered an unconventional strategy, as our goal wasn't to increase numbers, but rather to connect those making decisions on city regeneration with underrepresented communities directly affected by these decisions. And the Creative Europe feedback stated, the strategy of turning the stakeholders from passive observers into committed participants is very relevant and innovative. Particularly relevant is its educational methodology that starts from raising awareness of stakeholders, their involvement in arts events, and their final commitment on the theme of common interest, end quote. So after the planning meeting, as we developed our application, the organizational structure of the project was divided into 3 parts with a view to sharing responsibilities evenly, ensuring that all partners were engaged for the duration of the project. So first part, we established a joint steering committee with a regular schedule of meetings. So each partner had a clear voice in the decision-making process throughout the project. Secondly, we co-designed a program of 24 interconnected activities. And again, you can visit our website, memoryofwater.eu, to look at those, to view those activities. And thirdly, each partner was assigned a specific role within the delivery of the project. And again, to pull from our Creative Europe feedback, I quote, the Memory of Water program includes 24 interconnected activities, and each partner is committed to hosting activities from the program. The partners presented an even more detailed structure of central roles in project implementation and management to show convincingly how tasks were being equally distributed amongst all 6 partners that cover different aspects within this structure: management, digital engagement, evaluation, art form development. The involvement of the partners, all members of the same River Cities network, is strong. To ensure that all partners take part in the management aspect of the project, the joint steering group is formed. The workload and responsibilities of team members are thus divided equally with respect to their experience, skills, and capacities, which are complementary. The present consortium can clearly assure the effective implementation of the proposed activities. That's end quote. So again, our lead partner here, following our initial meeting, was able to match each partner with the specific role extremely well. So I was very grateful to be offered the artistic direction of the project, which was really a brilliant experience and a privilege to work with this team, and also with the artists who contributed so thoughtfully and generously to this process. And I know today is not about the artists, but I couldn't go without, just saying how grateful I am to have had the opportunity to work with them. So again, to give you an idea of this division of duties, in chronological order of the work plan, we began with our kickoff meeting hosted by the City of Ostend. So Ostend, as I said, I'm not going to go into the details of the activities, but just to give you an idea of the how evenly distributed the roles were. So Ostend hosted the kickoff meeting, which was really, really important for kind of finalizing the work program and for everybody meeting together. And also the appointed artists attended the kickoff meeting as well. They shared good practice in City Lab methodologies and also in community participation methodologies. Ostend was also the lead on the evaluation of the project, so the overall evaluation of Memory of Water. So 3 cities hosted the international residency program. So the first was Levadia. So they hosted a research residency and a production residency. And they were also responsible for the digital platforms, which is a really key part of our application and our project. So they developed our website. They also hosted a digital lab, for example. The second city to host the international residency program was Gdansk in Poland. And Gdansk they also had an extensive local program of city labs, which fed into the overall thinking of the project. They were responsible for internal communications. And they also, for example, in the process of organizing our workload, they worked out with the lead partner a timetable for reporting, which was really crucial that we had these quarterly deadlines for reporting, which was really helpful when we came to the end of the process. So internal communications and keeping track of that, of the steering group that had been established. Gorgeous Govan. So this was our 3rd location for the international residency program, and Govan and Fablevision, I should say, were responsible for the external communications, which was quite a big job considering there were 6 cities involved. But also within that, there was a subdivision of roles, for example, with the social media platforms that we established, like different partners took turns. So there was a timetable for each partner to take over the social media platforms and share what was happening in their city, during a specific activity, whether it was a local or an international activity from our work plan. And then we're on to Ormston House in Limerick. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we were responsible for the artistic direction. And also, while Ostend was responsible for the overall evaluation, we took a lead role in the evaluation process for the artists. So that included reporting and also questionnaires and gathering information and feedback from the artists throughout the process so that we can improve the experience each step of the way. And Ormston House was also due to host the artist gathering. So this was the idea was to connect the project artists, international artists, with local artists and all of our partners in Limerick. And there was going to be a period of reflection for the artists. And this is because the international residency program was so intensive. It was to give the opportunity for the artists, time and space to really discuss what had happened, what had been achieved, and how the project had informed their practice. And there was also going to be a series of large-scale public presentations of the project up to that date. Unfortunately, this was planned for April 2020, and we're all aware what happened. So we actually did Limerick, Govan and Stockholm actually did a pretty great job, I must say, at adapting their program in light of COVID-19 restrictions. So again, that's not the topic for today, but it also makes for a very, very interesting case study. And then our lead partner in Stockholm. So the lead partner is really an enormous job of the overall project management of the the project as lead partner. And on top of that, Intercult also commissioned a documentary film. So there was a filmmaker with us who worked both as an artist and documenting the process for all of the artists on throughout the international residency program. And Stockholm also hosted the dissemination labs. So this was at the end of the project and the dissemination of our results. So again, this was originally planned as a 2-day event in Stockholm, and it became a series of 8 webinars online. And again, you can actually watch all those webinars on the website. And I just would like to give a small shout out to Batumi. So again, our lead partner during the process made another application to connect with other artists in Georgia. So they became involved as associate partners of Memory of Water. And I think it's important to note that we actually, during the Memory of Water project, we also connected with other European projects, so and shadow experts as well. So we had Diana Berg from 2 Platform in the Ukraine, and we also connected with the Horizon 2020 project, SOS Climate Waterfronts, and Intercult again as a lead partner on that project. But that was a really, really valuable process to begin connecting these different types of European projects. So in our application, these were, in a nutshell, these were the sort of impacts that we were expecting. So we were looking at short-term, medium-term and long-term impact. And I mentioned at the that Ostend were responsible for the overall evaluation of the project. And actually, in the end, they produced, co-authored obviously with all the partners and the artists, a 144-page document on the evaluation of the project, measuring the impacts of the project, so in extraordinary detail. So this is something that was submitted as part of our reporting process. It's not currently a public interfacing document, but there will be elements that will be made public. I know myself and Liz are both including Memory of Water in our PhD papers, so there will be a dissemination through this channel as well. And that is the end of my presentation. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to any questions you might have.
Thanks a million, Mary. If you want to stop sharing, yeah, great. And we'll jump back on. That was amazing. We were just saying we were doing our own application recently, and we should have talked to you beforehand, because it is really, really good to hear about your all the aspects of your project, but also just the project management and how you did those quarterly reporting deadlines and all of that from the get-go. So it's just really, really key to hear how that worked for you guys. Sorry, I'm just trying to move forward with our presentation. Okay, we're good. Okay, so I'll move on. And thanks a million, Mary. So just to look at the cooperation project strands. So as Memory of Water was a small category in the cooperation as a cooperation project, and now since their application, or since that time within this program, there's a new category, and that's the medium one. So the so the category for the small is a co-funding of 35% of the budget from the European Union, and then it is incorporating a minimum of 3 partners from 3 countries. The overall budget is 200,000. And 80% of the total budget, sorry, 30% of, yeah, sorry, got confused there. So 80% of the total.
Just to cut in, it's 35% means of the total cooperation project budget will be ring fenced for the first category.
Yeah, sorry, that's exactly. So that's, so it's actually, yeah, 35% of the overall budget goes to category 1, 80% of the total budget of your project, your application, will be funded by the European Commission. And obviously you will get co-funding for the final 20%. Category 2 is a new category, and that's a medium one. So it's kind of great because it gives you that flexibility to not go for a large one, which could be a huge jump from a small project up to a large one with much more partners, etc., and a bigger budget. So the medium one is kind of fitting in between there. And again, 35% of the overall budget goes to this category, with a minimum of 5 partners from 5 countries, a budget of €1 million, and then 70% of the total budget is co-funded by the Commission. Category 3 is the larger one then, and 30% of the overall budget is allocated to that, and it is a minimum of 10 partners from 10 countries, and that is the 2 million jackpot budget, and 60% of that is co-funded by the European Commission. So how to apply, or who can apply? Organizations need to have a legal entity. They could be NGOs, cultural institutions, museums, arts and culture organizations, etc. They can be operating in one of the participating program countries, but they also must have sufficient financial and operational capacity to be able to apply and to be able to carry out these projects. The objectives, so across these two, you must select one. So they don't need you to be working on both kind of areas, but just one is definite. So they're looking at creation as one of the objectives, to strengthen the transnational creation and circulation of European works and artists, and innovation, to enhance the capacity of European cultural and creative sectors, to nurture talents, to innovate, to prosper, and to generate jobs and growth. So you must be kind of working towards either one of those objectives. So the cooperation project priorities, some of these were definitely part of the last program, but then there are obviously added priorities this time round. So audience is still a focus, and that's around increasing cultural access to all for art and cultural activities. Social inclusion, projects for or of marginalized groups, and encouraging intercultural dialogue within European partnerships. Sustainability obviously is a huge issue, and this has been trickled into the program. So that's to contribute to the European Green Deal. New technology for the culture creative sector to increase competitiveness across the culture sectors, to be able to work internationally at a competitive level, and that's kind of around capacity as well. International dimension, obviously this is key for these kind of projects. The cooperation projects is among your partnerships to build capacity to be active at an international level. And then sector specific priorities. So these are new. So an allocation of 10% is allocated to these areas, and they're literature, music, architecture, and cultural heritage. So you don't have to tick all of these boxes, all of these priorities, but they do kind of want you to work maybe within 2 areas, and to really, really hone your application to look at those, as Mary pointed out, the areas of the priorities that you want to work towards. Whoops. I think work packages. So yes, these are the newer part of the application form. And as we were saying just before we started today, that they do, on first look, they look quite scary, but really they aren't. They're really a great way to divide up your project and to make it simpler for reporting and budgeting, but also to keep those different areas of a project which kind of naturally you'd be working in anyway. So it's just to really formalize and divide up those areas of a project over the 2 years. And also when you come to look, if you get to the point of your application, you really do read each part, because it's very, very self-explanatory about exactly what they're looking for in each work package. So I'll explain what a work package is. So first of all, your eligible costs and your activities are grouped together under these work packages. And they do allow for emphasis on defined deliverables and outcomes for different areas of work. Across the work packages, there are 3, and they they are keen that you can add as many work packages, but that you have the very three that they're asking for, and they are project management, implementation, and dissemination, communication and dissemination. So that's how you divide up your work over the project, and with the partners obviously as well. So as I said, it keeps to a minimum your budgeting and reporting, because each body of work is allocated to a work package. The lump sums for your budget are calculated per your work package, and they are paid when the work package is completed. You need to clearly identify whether the action is completed, and then ongoing monitoring and documentation and evaluation is really important. So we'll look at actually what that means, basically. I'm going to hand it back to Katie now.
You are on mute. Just a couple of things to say before I start here, because there could be a bit of, you could be taken aback. I mean, this is a big change in terms of how you have to kind of represent your project within the application. But thinking back to Aoife's slide on how the funding is structured, the European Commission has increased their co-funding threshold for this award to make it more accessible, and this is massive. It's been asked for a long time, so they really are working towards simplification and increasing access to the program. And the whole structure of work packages really fits into this idea of simplification, because once you kind of deliver what you say you're going to deliver, there's not a huge amount of kind of, I guess, it's not so much about kind of financial auditing. This is about, if you deliver, what you say you were going to deliver, they will pay you a lump sum. So that's the good news, but it is going to be a learning curve in that projects are kind of structured a bit differently. So where should you be starting if there's people here that are looking to the upcoming deadline, or maybe the deadline after that? It's really start by defining your work packages. That's really key, because everything kind of flows from that. So once you've defined your work package, and we'll go, Aoife mentioned the kind of 3 core ones, you're going to group activities and costs around these work packages. So I'm going to just take you through a few examples. And again, these aren't, you don't have to use the wording I'm going to show you, which is taken from the kind of call document, but really these are the principles. So the first one is always going to be the management, administration, and coordination of the project. So this is probably the bulk of your admin and staff costs will come here. And the next one is project implementation. So this is where you can kind of, have essentially the artistic or cultural activities. And then the last one is communication and dissemination. And it's important to remember that obviously with any of these things, it will feed into your qualitative assessment as well. So it's all linked now. You have your work package, you have your activities within there, and your associated costs. So let's just go through a couple of the work packages as they define them. So we'll move on to the next slide. Is management. So this is essentially any of your, obviously your individual organizations kind of admin work on the project, but it's also your partner meetings and any kind of preparation meetings that you have. The reality with work packages is there's a huge emphasis now on, and you need to be probably putting very good systems in place around monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. And like Mary was saying earlier, this is probably going to necessitate more, kind of partner meetings, if you're kind of saying your quarterly meeting to look at your ongoing evaluation and reporting, and all of those meetings will need to be kind of minuted. You'll need to have, it's probably a lot more, say, record keeping, even though there was a lot of record keeping in the last one. So that's your first one. So the next one is communication and dissemination. And just remember, even in our work, because we've just done this application and it's exactly the same as you would have had to, you will have to do. Communication and dissemination is a really key one for the Commission, because this is about the visibility of your project, the sharing of your project to your kind of peers across Europe. This is really a kind of hearts and mind exercise. So this is kind of your ability to communicate the project, to communicate its outcomes, to reach a wider audience. So that's what this is. So this is any kind of promotional Events, it's any kind of essentially publications. That's a big one with ours, design and publication. If you have any kind of advertising, any of those costs. And again, this will be, the deliverables will be, the core one is all of these projects. We did an event on this a couple of years ago. All of these projects will have kind of a clear communication plan and strategy for the project. So you're going to have that as one of your deliverable. A lot of these projects will make a website, you know, for a repository of all the information that your project kind of publishes and gathers throughout its lifetime. You're going to probably have newsletters, kind of publications and brochures, any of your kind of posts, any kind of your analytics, but that's what the communication and dissemination package is. So next one. So this is, Aoife changed the title. I think the title in the call document is incomprehensible, but this is essentially your artistic activities. And this is where, if you can, to kind of keep them to the minimum, you know, because it's, for every work package, you know, you'll have almost its individual budget, then you'll have to list all the tasks. All of those tasks are then linked to a deliverable. So you don't want like 6 or 7 of these if you can avoid it. You're really probably aiming for ideally 3, possibly 4. So an example here would be, you could have a big residency program. So that could be a work package. You might have a series of performances. So anything, you know, kind of linked to those performances, be it rehearsals and workshops and the performance itself. So that's really where the thinking and the agreement is, spending time in this kind of implementation package. So again, the deliverables are obviously proof, some kind of proof that they happened. So again, it's really about kind of note taking and record keeping. Obviously, if there's like concrete outputs in terms of a, you know, performance or an exhibition, you'll have all the stuff around that. So if we want to move on. So this is an example because Aoife kind of mentioned, and this is where Aoife said it really well. You know, you're looking at, you are not going to get kind of multi-annual funding here, certainly here in Ireland, that would fund as broad a range of activities that you'll get within the context of a cooperation project. And one of those could be something around kind of capacity building. So this is, you know, thinking actually how can, there was a big craft project that looked at how do we develop the capacity of kind of makers and crafters here in Ireland to operate, you know, in that kind of commercial sphere, you know. So a lot of it was actually kind of training and workshops and new business models. So, you know, you could see that's going to have its own work program. So that could be around, they could have called that capacity building. So the other thing that's great about this is it does allow for, you know, benefit to kind of cultural workers and organizations, you know, in the form of professional development training or mentorship. So this is just an example of what could be that work package. I think move on. So this is again, I know it's networking and knowledge sharing is the example they gave. So this is what you'll often see with these projects when you start kind of researching them, is you have like the core partnership that's involved and the direct kind of project participants, but you'll really kind of need to demonstrate a wider reach. And how that can often happen is through, and you know, occurring sometimes towards the end of a project, would be in the form of kind of a conference or a symposium or workshops or seminars. It could be research is another one. These projects will often have research elements. So you can see there have been projects here that might have a arts organization as a partner, but they have a second Irish partner that could be a university or a college who is going to implement research. So there's a really broad, but all of those kind of activities could come under its own work package. Maybe you don't have as much networking, but I would say, you know, it could be networking, it could be research, but if you can kind of put them together in one. And again, this is just about kind of documentation of proof, really, what you're saying. It's just constant kind of record keeping and monitoring and reporting. And like Mary said, it's probably not something that you want to leave till the end. So these are the costs. So there's a huge range of costs that can be covered within a cooperation project. I don't have an ineligible cost, but really what essentially ineligible cost is obviously costs not directly associated with the project itself. They're often in the kind of realm of not wanting to essentially be covering debt that your organization might have. But aside from that, there's a huge range of costs that can be covered within it. The thing, how it's structured, and we will be holding an application workshop in August where we'll go through this kind of in greater detail. There's a lot of resources online now from the Commission kind of going through this technical side, but all of these costs, your budget will be broken down. All of these costs will be apportioned to a work package. So you might find that the majority of your direct staff costs will come under the work package 1, the administration, but then you'll probably have some that might be associated with communication and dissemination. Subcontracting is probably something that it's been debated a long time of how you define that, but you probably want to keep this to a minimum if possible. So the other thing is the bulk would be obviously your purchase costs, as they call them now. So that's really all your travel, accommodation, all your kind of, they do allow for equipment. So I think they have a depreciation kind of calculation, but the main one here will be kind of artist fees and production costs. Financial support to third parties. So this would be anyone who's involved in your project outside the official partnership. So this is if you're working with artists, or you might be taking some form of activity to a country that's not participating in the program, that's not within the partnership, this would be classed as financial support to third parties. This currently, I think, is capped at 60,000 per project. And the last one, so this is really your kind of organizational benefit, and that would be a flat rate calculation of indirect costs. So that's that. So I don't know if I'll continue, I can't remember, but essentially this is how everything's assessed. I'll send everyone out a copy of the call document after this, so you can see they set it out. But really this is something you should kind of have beside you as you're developing your project. It's a very competitive process. Historically, Ireland does quite well when we put in applications above, I guess, the overall average of success. I think the quality, is always here, but it's very competitive. Now, the first 2 rounds of the program, there will be a larger budget, which is great news. But the Commission this time has set a threshold for funding. So if your maximum points that you can score are 100 points, projects that score under 70 will not be funded, even if the budget is there. So they are looking for a high level of quality, and you have to score more than 50% under each category. So these are the categories of assessments. The first is relevance, and that's relevance to the program objective. So this is where you're always linking back. You're always linking back. There's your project, and then there's kind of having to kind of put it through the lens of the objectives of the program. So always have that in your mind. The quality and the content of the activities. So as I said, Irish projects have tended to score very well under this category. Project management, again, this becomes very important in their new. So with the lump sum kind of payment, what they're really looking for is you have to have a really strong project management system in place and be able to demonstrate that. And then dissemination is the final one. And just as a kind of word of caution, if projects, when I've seen kind of assessments back from people, this is the category that people tend to kind of lose points that they can't afford to lose on. So do spend time thinking of the kind of communication and dissemination with your project. So just to have a look back on the last program, and I think Leona might have shared our latest case study publication, which covered 3 years, I think up until 2019. So over the course of the last program, 68 Irish organizations were involved in Creative Europe funded projects. The total project grant amount was 45 million, and directly to Ireland, 5 million was granted. We represent 2.26% of the overall funding, which this is kind of crass, but essentially that means we're taking out in a sense kind of more than we put in. So that's kind of, I guess, good news. And overall, over the 7 years of the program, our success rate was just under 40%. So we are above the overall program average of 23. And I think Mary referenced that we, as a trend, Ireland doesn't tend to, we tend to have a very geographically diverse kind of partnership. So we've partnered with 34 countries out of it was formerly 41 countries. So the other thing which has been brilliant news is the Arts Council in 2016 piloted the Creative Europe Co-Funding Award. And this award is open to arts and culture organizations who were successful under the cooperation project strand. So you are eligible to apply to the Arts Council for a portion of your match funding, the national funding that's required. Over the course from 2016 to 2021, we received 32 applications and 25 projects were funded. The Irish value, so the Irish budget for all these projects was just under 3 million, and the European grants to those projects was 1.1. And the total Arts Council funding awarded was 582,000. So I think this one is back to Aoife. I'm going to turn myself off here.
Yeah. Hi. So yeah, we're getting to the end here, but we're just, before we jump off, we want to just kind of give you a bit of a steer. So it depends where you are in your kind of process. As Mary said, they started, and I thought this was interesting, with a research question, and that was how they kind of connected with other you know, peer organizations that seem to be based in the same area, and that was kind of through a network as well, but seemed to have the same issue or had the same question about their geographic location and the situation there. So that's an interesting starting point. So I suppose for us at this point is to kind of develop that, or to be really thinking about that now. What is your starting point? And in a way that can help you connect to other organizations that will kind of fit with your question or with your project idea. So again, always think about the capacity of your organization. In terms of Mary, as she was our example today, I mean, their capacity was quite small. So in fact, it is kind of doable. It is doable to be part of one of these one of these projects. But I guess it's whether you go for whether you go as a partner, certainly you wouldn't be going as a lead with a small capacity, but whether you go as a partner into a project and kind of how's that going to work, and is it going to take away from your core work, I guess. So it's just to be aware and to assess the capacity of your organization. And already, do you work in the area of the priorities of this Creative Year program, or the priorities for cooperation projects? Does your work align with that, or is it just something, these priorities are an area of work that you do want to start or continue some work in that area? So just kind of assess at all of those avenues, whether this is a good time for your organization, and then working again on the national or the national partnerships that you might have already started or that you're kind of identifying. So think of all these are all elements of working towards making an application. So whether you're working with local authorities, other organizations in Ireland, a university, you know, there are different, obviously there are lots of different types of organizations you could be working with, but just to identify with them already. And also then obviously the Arts Council is another, as Katie said, it is the co-funder that if you're eligible to apply for it, but you need to they need to be aware of your work in a way. You need to be aware of what the Arts Council do as well. So be aware of your partners. We also assist in partner searches. So if in fact you know what your project is, you know what your question is, your area is, but you actually have found it difficult to identify or to make partner connections, then we can assist on that. So do keep in touch with us. and we can help out through the Creative Europe network. And then if you've got your project, you're kind of in the development of that, as Katie said, that the work packages kind of come out of that project. So in a way already your work packages are kind of forming probably around your project management, around the implementation, so around those activities. What do you think you're going to do? And then the follow on is the communication and the dissemination. So kind of work all of that into your planning already. Keep in touch with us, and as Katie said, we're going to have an application workshop in August the 19th, so we'll keep in touch. And obviously if you're not on the newsletter, do sign up, because we'll be always informing people through that about the dates coming up. And the deadline for this cooperation project is the 7th of September, this coming September. And as Katie said, we anticipate there'll be a second deadline, because obviously this one kind of came quick enough this year, but it is to fill that gap to have one in 2021, and that might be towards the end of this year, but certainly it'll be early 2022. So that needs to be confirmed, but we will keep you informed. And as I mentioned, we have the Cooperation Projects application workshop, but we also have the circulation of European literary works, that is next week. And then after that, we have the Creative Innovation Lab funding clinic, and that's around a cross-sectoral funding call. So if anyone's interested, obviously go onto our website and sign up. We'll give you kind of an overview again of that funding call. And that is it for the moment.